purpose to be more of like an appetizer. This is an overview. So if you want more in-depth information, please let us know. If you have questions about any area of the software that I'm going into, then we can schedule a webinar or a Zoom and jump in as deep as you would like, and actually use some of your information and some of your questions for examples. So again, also with having such a varied crowd, so we have some current clients, some eSchool people, some eFinance people. It's an unenviable task to take in a very short period of time and try to explain in any level of detail the different integrations we have with all of the PowerSchool products. So I'm going to try to hit this at a very high level and just to give you guys an overview of what's possible. Also, I want to be good stewards of your time as well. I mean, you guys are giving me time also. So if there's something that you have a question specific about, if you have a certain scenario that's in your district that you think is unique, please feel free to ask questions, and I'm more than happy to answer them if at all possible. And again, if it's more pertinent or relevant to take up at a different time, we'll do that. But for this afternoon, we're going to talk a little bit, and by the way, somehow, if there's anyone here on the TSUN board, you gave me back-to-back days after lunch, so I'm going to do my best, and we're going to muddle through this. At least it wasn't pasta day. So talking a little bit about, if you're not familiar with our organization, as I mentioned, this is, I don't know, my 15th or so TSUN in a row. It's really hated to miss the past couple of years. We've been working with PowerSchool now since 2001, so we've been partners with them for a long time. We actually grew up in the PowerSchool channel through the Penimation, then SunGuard, then I don't know, 3 or 4 other companies, and then PowerSchool. So we're very familiar with eSchoolPlus, eFinancePlus, BusinessPlus, all of their applications. When we talk about integration, what we're talking about is a deep level of understanding what you as districts face using those solutions and how we can use our product to supplement those applications. We're not here to replace different areas of eSchool or of eFinance or other PowerSchool applications, but more to understand that document management and the ability to give your users access to the information and documents when they need it as a supplemental player to those applications is what we're here to do. They're going to be working in your core line of business applications. How do we then take the information that's coming in all throughout your district, put it in a central location, and then serve it up through those applications? That's what we do, and I'm going to show you how we do that in a secure fashion. So where do we help? Generally, when we start talking to school districts, it's because one of a couple of things has happened. One is that someone's just gotten pissed off from not being able to find a piece of paper they need over and over and over again. There could be a physical constraint, i.e. I literally cannot put another filing cabinet in the filing cabinet room. It could be that I have a department that has been paperless for a while, and they're starting to bump into the edges of whatever solution they may have picked, and they want something that's a more enterprise approach, so they'll come to us. Or as I shouldn't say famously announced, but infamously heard from a district, their eSchoolPlus database was so big with attachments, they couldn't complete in the 12-hour window they had to back up. So they had to do something to be able to get the documents out of eSchool. So if you're not quite there yet, don't worry. There's a support group and a number you can call, and they'll talk you through that process. But that's generally when districts will approach us and say, look, we've been doing this for a while. We have a taste of paperless, or I came from a district that was using something paperless. We want to see what you guys can do, and that's generally when we're engaged. So at rare instances or rarer instances, generally paperless is kind of where we start, but there are districts also that come to us with workflow or electronic form issues. And that's generally when I've already taken most of the paper. I may have removed it from my district, but now I'm still getting paper in certain areas because I have all these little disparate processes that start with a PDF form that someone downloads, and then guess what? They print it, right? And so now I have other paper moving around. And so looking to improve various aspects of the district that are not generally falling under the the functionality of my SIS or my ERP system. And so we will work there also. If you're moving to the cloud, sometimes that is a good reason for districts to work for us also. Now, when we talk about document management with K-12 schools, I use paperless because that's a general term that most people understand. That's not what we do, okay? In the biggest areas, while we can take you paperless, we don't want to start with paper, right? We want to start and capture documents when they're in their electronic form. So when you're in PowerSchool Enrollment and your parents are submitting documents, they're already in a digital format. Why wouldn't we just take it from there? When I go to hit the print button in eFinance or eSchoolPlus, what's being output is a PDF, right? I'm not going to my printer then. Okay, so when we say paperless, I want to stop the creation of paper before it ever starts. Once I have a piece of paper though, and it's in variable, and paper sends me like potato chips, you never have just one, right? So document management humor, just rolling. It's real thin. I don't have a lot of material to work with here. But again, what we don't want to have to do is we don't have to do the scanning. The scanning adds steps to the process. So if we can get away without scanning, we don't want to do that. But if we do have to scan, we'll make it as easy as we can. The idea being, though, is that with all of my PowerSchool applications, I have got ways to store documents in. If you've got Talent Ed, there's documents associated with Talent Ed. If you're in eSchool, there's attachments, eFinance attachments. And so there's all these different ways of storing documents, which are great, until you want to start having cross-departmental access to documents, even though people need access to those. And now I'm looking at trying to get additional licensing or other issues, or I want to see documents across the district, not through an individual, an application or a single student. So that's really where we come into play. All right, let's jump out of this PowerSchool real quick and jump into our software. Now, for those of you that may have been familiar or may have seen Content360 in the past, this is going to be very different. So this is going to look very different than you may have been used to before. So Content360 in previous versions was SharePoint based. This is built on a product called OnBase. And OnBase is an industry-leading document management solution. We've been partners with them for almost as long as we've been partners with PowerSchool, and it's in use in 12,000 organizations worldwide. They are the 800-pound gorilla, if you will, in the room as it goes to this. I mention that only because sometimes they're like, oh my gosh, I used to work at someone else. It looks just like, yeah, that's the reason why. So Content360 is OnBase for K-12 schools. All right, let's talk a little bit about what we're seeing here, and I'll just walk you through this again at a very high level, some of the different pieces of functionality. And we're going to start with student records, and we'll start with retrieval, okay? By show of hands, how many of you here are more interested in student documents than finance? Okay, wow, quite a few. Finance documents? Awesome, okay. And HR, okay, fantastic. Wait, that's the trifecta. We're good. All right. Since we have the majority of people with student records here, let's start there. But we'll definitely grab a bunch of finance and human resources examples also. Okay, so when we talk about filing, or when we talk about student records, generally what we're talking about is some version of an electronic student cumulative folder. And in Content360, we are going to create, I'm going to try and adjust my real estate a little bit, the resolution of the monitor here. What we're talking about is the ability to go through and to organize documents in some method that makes sense based upon the document types. So in this example under Lindsay Abert, I've got a cumulative folder which may store more permanent type records. I've got a student folder which may be more working documents, and then I have a special education folder that may or may not have any documents in it depending upon that student. So the software itself will automatically create and build these folders as documents or records are added to the student. I'm not going in and having to create all of these documents or folders for each individual student. So this is just a method of quickly being able to retrieve documents that I have access to. So I should point out as well that if I don't have access to individual documents in a specific folder, or don't have access to the folder, it won't appear to me in my results. Now, where do these documents come from? Well, we talked a little bit earlier about PowerSchool registration. Documents captured through the PowerSchool registration process will flow automatically into Content360. I say it's automatic. There's one step you guys have to take to download them, and then it will automatically flow into the system. Anything created by any PowerSchool applications, eFinance or eSchool, will automatically be captured and stored and put into the correct folder and category inside the software. Like we said, we don't want to have to print and then scan if at all possible. Okay, and if you have questions about the specific integrations and how this works, it's not magic. I can certainly walk that through for you. Now, if I go into, let's just take a look at Julie's folder. What's interesting also is that the folders are smart and can alert us if there are documents missing. I realize this is going to be tough to see in the back, but this is a little red notification saying that the home language survey is missing. It's a document we're expecting to see in this folder, but it's not there. Okay, if I had a copy of that on my desktop, for example, I can just drop and drag it into Julie's folder, and all I need to do is then tell what this is. So this is a student services, and it is a home language survey. And then because I dropped it into Julie's folder, it knows where to go. And as you import it, oops, you know what? I dropped and dragged it into the wrong folder. My bad. Okay, so that when I add the home language survey, it will then highlight that it's no longer in red, and I know I've got that document in the system. I actually didn't take it the first time, so now I have two. Any questions about that process? And the folder structure is built the first time we see a document related to an individual student. And by the way, this is the same process for personnel files. So if I look at personnel records, it is simply a matter of, so in this example, because there are so many folders, it's giving me the option to search. But you can see from a personnel perspective, we have the same folder structure that I'm able to go through and manage as well. Any questions about that process?
So to automate this, as part of your workflow, say I've already got 500,000 documents on a shared drive.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be able to go through and read all that.
Yeah. So Scott, and this question comes up invariably with every district. I've got X number of documents in attachments. I've got X number of documents in a shared drive. I've got X number of documents in another imaging system. What do we do about that? Almost always, we will have some sort of an import process. Now, shared drives are a little different only because we can extract and import information from shared drives, but it's only going to be as valuable as what you've got in the documents or how they're organized now. If it's a shared drive that is literally been on your network forever, and everyone has their own individual folders, and they've been storing documents, and then, I can't find it on this, so I'll put it in mine and rename it something else. If there's some sort of a codification of how they're stored, we can use that to import the documents and have them automatically be indexed. If it's literally just like grandma's attic and there's stuff everywhere, even then we can still run some OCR processes and maybe pull it off of there. And with 500,000 documents, we would want to do that. But it's not as reliable as if you're storing them by date, name, student ID, something along those lines. If you're storing it like that, it's no problem. We have a module that allows us to import from directories automatically. Yep, great question. Now, again, if it's coming from PowerSchool Enrollment or attachments in eSchool, those type things, we know the database structure, so we just use that information to build the folders. Yep, great question. Any other questions? Okay. Now, this is obviously one method of accessing documents. It's probably, it's a nice familiar method of accessing documents. But if I wanted to really just make this, just as easy as possible, I could almost put this like in a kiosk in the lobby, right? This could be my entire interface into Content360. And if you can't read it, it says student ID, last name, first name, so on and so forth, right? So, I mean, I don't have to be ever trained on the software. I don't need to know anything about it to say, well, if I enter a student ID and click search, I'm probably going to find documents, right? So again, this could be the entire interface. If you want to open this up to teachers or to people that are not going to use a lot of training, they could have only this view. And so we can make this approach as simple as possible and as straightforward as possible to give access to documents and information as reliably as we need to. And again, of course, I could add this, the nuance that yes, all of this is secured based upon your role. Now, however, one other method of document retrieval that we have is directly from within eSchool. Right, so if I'm in eSchool, I'm on a student summary screen, I can just double click on that screen and then display the documents that I have access to. All right, this is not magic. We're not adding links or making any changes to eSchool. It's something that, I will say there's a couple of caveats with this also. This is Windows client, and what we're doing is we're just noting where you are inside the software. When you perform a specific action, we use the data on the screen and use that to retrieve the documents. Okay. So same thing, you'll notice this is birth certificates and transcripts and things like that. Same thing if I'm in eFinance. Double click on the screen, now I'm seeing checks, invoices, and things like that, purchase orders related to that transaction. So that is probably, I shouldn't say probably, that's definitely the easiest method of document retrieval. Now, I could also pop from that retrieval directly into the folder. So I could combine the two pieces of functionality and don't necessarily have to start with just one here. Also, we get a lot of questions about, well, how do you secure documents? You know, a student is rostered in this homeroom day one, and then day 5 they're in this homeroom. How do you transfer the security? Well, eSchool does not make that information real easy for us to get access to. Generally, what we will do is we will use this approach to, and we will only give teachers access to the record from here. So if I can see the student information in eSchool, then I can see the underlying documents. If I can't, then I can't access it. Okay.
So, okay, so you touched reg. What about medical?
What about what? Sorry.
Medical. So, if I wanted to do the same thing with the medical package and store immunizations, shot records, doctor's notes, blah, 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 that would be the same type of security?
Well, same type of security, but just given access. Is anyone here from Brownsville? Brownsville does a lot with medical records, but yes. So what they do, Scott, is that basically if you have AD credentials to a certain AD group, that's generally what we use. It's not the only way we can use it, but that's generally what we use to lock down the documents and the records. So if I have access to nurses, if I'm registered as a nurse, I only see the documents that I have access to.
But it's by AD.
Well, again, the most common method, yes. It doesn't have to be by AD group. We have our own security model also.
Can that link with eSchool security?
That's what I was referring to earlier. Ish. Yes, we've done it before. It is eSchool does not make that as clean as we would like it to be. That's the easiest way for me to say it. Yeah. And I blame eSchool. It's not necessarily eSchool. There's even a PowerSchool here. I'm sorry, I don't mean to. The lightning's going to come down. But yeah, generally, I mean, turn recording. No, but generally, that's the struggles we run into. It's any LDAP compliant security protocol we can interface with like that. Okay, all right. So that's document retrieval. We talked about, now let's talk a little bit about how we get documents into the software. Oh, before that, let's jump into something else real quick. So one of the things that we are working on quite a bit, and you'll see I've got a lot of different examples of things up here. These are different scenarios that we've used and worked with districts around. So one of the common requests, especially from student records, is, and this actually plays into human resources as well, how do I share information with people securely that are not on our network, right? So a student transfers intra-district, no problem, because we just reassign it to the new district and that's no issue. But what if they move out of your district? What if they move into another location? So one of the things we do, and this again from a workflow and an access perspective, same thing works from a human resources. When I have a new hire that they're not a part of my network yet, but I want to be able to share different documents with them, or I want them to be able to fill out different documents. So a first step may be that I jump onto the website, I fill out my record requests, I attach whatever authorization that I need, and this is an electronic form that's in our software. I sign that I have the ability and the desire and the need to see these student records. I submit it. The form is sent into now a workflow internal to the district. Someone looks at it and says, yep, this person does deserve access to it. They attach the appropriate authorization form, and we will then automatically email them or send an email that contains a link to those records. And we're not just sending them a link to the records, we're also have the ability to generate a password. And the password could be something that they know. It could be something like, I don't know, last 3 digits of your date of birth plus your last 4 of your social, something along those lines. So you can create the password, or you can just have it be the link. When they click the link, it will take them into our secure file share and sync location, where they can then go through and view the documents. They can download them, they can add them to their system, whatever they want to do. And you also will determine the link expiration date. So how long are these available? And so it's just an easy way to be able to share documents that's not email, because especially when you're dealing with personally identifiable information, email is it's a gray area for sure, and it could be a red area depending upon the information there. So again, just a nice, easy way. And imagine, being able to share those and fulfill those record requests with literally just a touch of a button. Same thing with when I jump into like new hire folders. I can create this where it's basically offer letter and application. Start there, right? Upload the I-9, upload your W-4, and so on and so forth. Some of this is, if you're using Talent Ed or like Frontline, you may be able to capture that information there, and that's great, no problem. We'll still flow through into our software. But if there's an odd document that you didn't capture either during the application process or during the like the registration process, so supplemental registration documents, another big one for us. They can go on and upload documents they did not capture during the registration process. Okay, and the nice thing also about this is if I have any questions about what's happened, I can go through and see everything that's happened to these, who accessed them, when they accessed them, how they authenticated. So I know that they were, even though they were out of the district's control, so to speak, you still know what happened. Okay. Jumping back into getting documents into the software. We talked a little bit about drop and drag. That's easy. For those of you that are using Outlook, another way to get documents into the software is just by creating Outlook folders. You can create Outlook folders where you drop and drag documents in there. They're then automatically pre-populated and sent into the software. So common application, I'm working with vendors, and I have a vendor, I get a lot of emails or invoices from a particular vendor, I can have an Outlook rule that sweeps them into a folder, and then the software can pick up the invoices from the folders and deliver them into the correct location. So what we're doing is we're trying to make the capture and categorization process as easy as possible. All right. So if it's Gmail, in Gmail, there's not a direct plugin like this. It's basically file save as, and then you're doing some uploading from there. But at the same time, you can still save those into a location where we pick it up, sweep it, and identify it for what it is. So you can save it in different folders, and then we'll automatically categorize them that way. If we want to get into a little more advanced functionality, when we start talking about anything other than a text searchable PDF. Okay, so if you're receiving text searchable PDFs, we can go and read into those files, into those documents, and pull out the categorization information. But if you're getting pictures, if you're getting, someone took a picture of a document from their phone and they send it to you, or maybe it's one of your employees took a picture of a document from the phone. Now we've got to talk a little bit about, all right, what are we going to do with this? And Scott, using your example, I've got a hodgepodge of tons of information. How do we want to categorize it? We can also do some OCR processing on these documents. So I'm pretty sure at this point in time, everyone believes we can actually scan the document. So and take it from a paper and get it to digital. So we're going to pick it up like we've already scanned the documents. I have a nice section where once the documents are imported, and again, this is things that are just images, right? They're not. So I have the ability here to go in and delete reorder pages. So if I realize, oops, this is not a page, this is like the back page, I can delete it here. Or if this page, this is actually part of this document, I can just do some drop and drag right there. So I can really make sure that what I'm importing is good information. And then, so when I save it now, you'll notice it said there were a total of 4 documents. Now there's only 3. But again, when I go into the indexing of the document process, we're going to do a little bit of OCR on these. So you'll see that now this is a admittedly demonstration version, right? So yeah, of course, there's a nice, neat student ID right in the location I'm looking for. Oh, how amazing, right? That's not always the case, as you all know. A lot of documents are handwritten. A lot of documents may have, it's a fax of a copy of something written on a napkin. But anyway, so you're not going to see, it's not perfect from an OCR perspective, but it does give us the ability to go through and rapidly index some of this information. So when it captures a piece of data, what we're doing here in general, this is true even when we talk about PDF documents. In general, we're only going to try and grab 1 or 2 pieces of information, not because we don't have the ability to grab more. Generally, though, you're going to have more information about this student, this employee, or this financial transaction in PowerSchool, right? eSchool eFinance. So we just grab what we need, and then we will go and do lookups to grab the rest of the information. And lookups are either going to be in the form of ODBC, data download, or API connection, depending upon what you have access to in PowerSchool. Okay, so again, nothing magic here. We want to get as much information as we need to categorize this document and then determine what it's related to or who it's related to, and then we'll pull the information from PowerSchool to fill in all the rest of the information. Now, in the event the information is not in PowerSchool, so let me just drop down here. We do have the ability to say, let's just say I want to grab something that I didn't fill out, like mobile number here. So I can go over here to my mobile number and just highlight it and click, and it will populate from there too. So we do have the ability to, and again, it looks real cool in a demo moment. I don't want to undersell this, but generally, if you're doing like a lot of data entry, you don't even want to touch the mouse. You just want to start flying through here. And so we want to get as much information as we can off the form to speed that process up. But in the event that, I'll tell you where it actually does kind of make sense. If I jump over to like an address column and I don't want to have to retype that, I can highlight the whole thing and that will pull in the address. So that's pretty valuable instead of having to retype that. But if the information is in your PowerSchool applications, we're going to Okay, any questions about capturing, categorization, anything along those lines? Okay, now specifically talking about eFinance. So there's a lot we do from an eFinance perspective that helps improve the accounts payable process. And I can, it will be something that I would love to talk to you guys about for eFinance users in a little more detail outside of, because it's like its own presentation. But we do have the ability then to take invoices that have either PO-based or non-PO-based, use data in eFinance to go through and select what you want to pay. Using that information, we can create a batch payable in eFinance to where you're keying in next to nothing. So there's some really cool things we can do from an eFinance perspective to eliminate keying of information. So I'll use that. I'm sorry, as a quick appetizer view, maybe for what we can do from an eFinance perspective. Okay, and the reason I bring it up now is it involves us using some OCR capture on the documents also, and depending upon how you filled out a requisition, whether it was in our software or in eFinance, we can use that information as well. Okay, any questions about that process? All right, let's talk now a little bit more about the electronic forms, and we showed that example of that very quickly. So electronic forms in our software, and being completely transparent here, as PowerSchool adds more workflows and things to eFinance and eSchool and some of the things like that, the relevancy of what we do hasn't really changed, because what we're doing is we're, like I said in the beginning, supplementing what they can do there. So when we start talking about vacation requests and paid time off requests and supplemental training requests and things like that, one of the things that we've done very recently was threat assessments. So how do I track threat assessments in my school district, and what do I do, and how do I manage that? How do I make sure that the process is tracked from front to back, and we're following up actively on all threats and making sure and evaluating them? So it's processes like that. If you think right now of where electronic forms and workflows fit in your school district, think of 2 or 3 things. One is, where am I managing a process using a spreadsheet? Right? What processes are driven by a spreadsheet, or maybe like a little access database? Okay, those are the type areas where districts will come to us and say, well, can you help us with this process? So we talked a little bit, and I'm going to jump down here to some of my human resources pieces. Let's see. So one of the electronic forms that we worked with is a new hire certification, right? So new employee comes on board. What do I need to do? How do I need to work with this? What processes have to take place to make sure that this new employee, but new hire, soon to be employee, are productive on day one? Do they have a desk? Do they have a cell phone? Do they have access to the systems they need to have access to? Are they going to spend day one filling out benefits information, or can I have them fill that out in advance so they're productive as soon as they hit the ground? This is the kind of information that we're capturing on these processes. So some of the things we can do from an electronic forms perspective, we can have fields that are required. We can populate information based upon the evaluation of a field. So if I enter my date of birth, and I can pull up back information. I enter in student ID, I can pull back information. So I can have the form be, let me just go through here. So this is like we'll say it's a rehire. So you can see as I'm filling out different pieces of information, the form is changing to capture more information. The idea being is that I don't have to have forms that are, legal size 2-point font, because I have to put everything in front of them, right? Every single piece. Well, I don't need to capture all this. I need to fill out a few pieces of information, and then I'll display the rest of the information that's necessary. Do I need a signature? Do I need attachments? Right? These things to build these forms are literally drop and drag features. So this is something that power users, I wouldn't say necessarily, and I don't want to understate what's required to develop these forms, because generally what will end up happening is they're like, oh, this is no problem at all. Hey, I've got this expense reimbursement request or something on those lines, and we get the form, we're like, okay, this is pretty straightforward. Well, what happens to this form? Well, on Tuesday it works like this, on Wednesday it works like this, and on Thursday this person's got to improve it, but they're out of the office, so now it's got to go here, and I need this information for these three. And so generally it's the form process that becomes more complex than the form itself. So I don't want to say that, hey, you can sit on this and design forms day one. If it's a very simple form, and it truly is a simple form, all right, then that's true. But when we talk with school districts, a lot of times there's complexities built into their processes that because people have been there 20 years, they just know. And when you try to put that into the system, that's when you need to start doing some discovery and additional work. So again, I'm just being as transparent as I can for what's involved here.
Can these forms be created with tokens so that it's not relying on the initial submitter to enter something to then pull their data where we can send them a form?
Yeah, so, and the answer is yes. It's not necessarily a token, but so the two examples we look for that is, I want to fill out a form, I only get halfway through and I'm gonna save it and come back and fill it out later. And the second is, yes, they give us a rudimentary piece of information, and then we update that information later on. Absolutely, both of those are possible. Yep. Now, and again, those are both, what ends up happening is we move them into different stages in the workflow process, and we use the workflow on the back end to populate that information. Yep. Great question. Great question. Okay, all right, we've got just a few minutes here. I want to make sure that we're, let's see, get through this. All right, so now from a workflow perspective, we talked a little bit about workflow earlier. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this. Just know that from a workflow perspective, this is a very, very robust workflow solution. You can use a drop and drag workflow approach. There are something like 130 predefined actions. So when we talk about workflow, it's not necessarily that I'm just going to move this document from point A to point B. When the document arrives at point B, I want to make sure that it's real, it's good. We've done a duplicate check. We've checked it against information maybe in other systems to make sure that what I'm providing to that person at point B is valid and it's real, and they have all the information they need in order to make an intelligent decision about what to do with that document. So I won't go into a lot of detail about workflow because it really is, again, its own presentation, but just know that from a workflow perspective, our goal is to provide the users with all the information they need to make the best decision they can at the right time. Okay, so administrators, managers love workflow. Users that have been getting away with filling out the top section of a form and then the comments, they put like 19 things that really should have been in the form, right? They start to get a little bit of heartburn because now we're pushing back on them to making sure they're filling out the information that they should be filling out. Another thing with workflow we use a lot is notifications. So we talked about that when I showed the email. You click on the link and it pops up the form. So notifications are a big part of workflow to make sure that as documents are flowing through your district, people are interacting with them at the appropriate time, and it's not just going off into Never Never Land where you're never going to see it again. So we do a lot of notifications. The tendency is to over-notify in the beginning, and then finally, I'm like, well, can you dial this back a little bit? My inbox is full of notifications for unperformed workflow actions. All right, two final things that we'll point out, and then we'll wrap up. So we talked a little bit about documents that were missing from a folder perspective. This is an example of a report we can run. This is a missing I-9s by department, right? But this could be missing student documents by campus, right? So the ability to see at a district level what's going on in your individual processes. Now, again, I know there's a lot of reporting and dashboard type functionality in eFinance, but if you want to go through and at a glance make sure that you are compliant, because you have all the documents that you're supposed to have. It's generally not the documents that you're keeping too long, it's what you don't have that'll get you in trouble from an auditing perspective. And then talking a little bit about documents and what do I have in the system. Jump into, so this is an example of how we manage our retention. Actually, let me jump into one more section here. So every document that enters into Content360 has a timer associated with it. So we want to make sure that we're not storing anything. We have everything we're supposed to have, and we don't store anything longer than we're supposed to store them. Now, from a student perspective, let's be candid. In Texas, all of y'all are going to be retired before you run into a student retention policy for cumulative records, right? For finance is generally, it's like 7 years and a day, right? Human resources, this is where this starts to get very interesting. So, especially when you have, because what ends up with the human resources perspective, you've got a lot of different requirements. You have employees that leave and come back sometimes, probably not in your districts, but in other districts it happens. So how do I make sure that I'm storing that information for as long as I need to? Also, again, from a student perspective, it doesn't happen that often. From a human resources perspective, we get involved in litigation. And then what happens to the retention schedule when we go through the litigation process. So all of that is able to be managed inside of Content360. So I can go through and say, okay, from a records management administrator, show me all of the documents that are being registered or that are being managed. Probably not a very useful view, but I could also go through and say, all right, well, just show me all the documents that have a status of being destroyed. Like these are documents that are no longer in the system. And if I want to drill down to see, okay, what was the record? I just double click on that and go down to the document itself. And in this example, I know you can't read that back there, but this is, it's not the document, it's the certificate of instructions stating where it went through into the process. And we built this, we created this automatically. So you've got, for the auditors, hey, there was a record here, but per our policy, we destroyed it and it's now no longer a legal albatross hanging around our neck.
Is there a time limit of 7 years or something as far as the records management?
Yeah, so there's no time limit for records management. The way the records management process works is this. We have an event and a timeline. And so if you think about Texas State Registrar, how they're going to give you like an event and then a timeline by which you have to store it. It could be hire date, it could be employee departure date, it could be graduation date, it could be date of creation plus 3 years, date of creation plus 7 years. So those are the criteria we use to set up the initial retention schedules. And then after that, it's going to be up to an individual manager of a department to say, yep, I agree with this. But what we're doing here is we're giving the users, we're giving the software the timer, if you will, so the alarm bell goes off. Okay, something needs to be managed. The software is saying that these documents are up for destruction. What do you want to do? Yep, great question. And again, at any point in time in the process also, I can place a hold event on this and then give the software the reason why there's a hold. Is it legal? Is it litigation? Is it some other reason? I can configure all that also. Yep. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. I appreciate you very much in sitting through this. Hopefully this wasn't too disjointed and you guys were able to see some value in the pieces we put together right here. If you have additional questions, we are going to be at our booth for the rest of the conference. Please feel free to stop by. If you want more information and want to go into a deeper dive, feel free to reach out to us. We can jump on a WebEx, or I'm in Texas frequently. I'd be happy to stop by and see you guys. But thank you all very much, and have a great rest of your conference. Appreciate it.